ci думаю.
It's videotaping us.
Huh?
So it's working.
Yeah, I think so. enough light?
Oh yeah. It is fine. Woo.
So you're talking to me.
I'm talking to my grandson.
Yeah.
To one of my grandsons. I never stopped talking to my grandsons. Granddaughter either. Oh, these lights are very fancy. Someday there's going to be a tch, and there's going to be a big fire. That'll be
Okay, I'm going to
interesting.
disappear. Oh, you were showing Sam this. I don't know if you want to show it to him at all.
Well, if you want to, you could borrow that.
Yeah,
I got another copy
I
of
think
it.
I'll borrow this.
Yeah.
So,
I love these people that take pictures all the time. So what?
what did you think of the parade?
I don't know. I didn't have so much. I wasn't involved really. I just sat down in the car and driven around. I guess it's very typical of what these parades are. It gives the people a little bit of look into their own country's history and a little enthusiasm about what we supposedly stand for. That's not bad. What did you think of it? So the question back at you.
No, yeah, it was kind of a good recognition for the various veterans. Did you?
I think the weather dampened the whole thing. Yeah, it's they used to end it up at the cemetery, and they played taps. I don't think they did that this time. At least I wasn't aware of it. And I think I should speak to the guy that ran the parade. He lives up the street. I think it has more meaning now. There are a lot of people sitting around there who haven't got the foggiest about what it means. Unless they lost somebody in the family. It's just as well that they don't lose anybody.
You want to tell me a little bit something about your earlier childhood, what you remember from?
My earlier childhood, I've been told that I was born at an early age. And I don't remember a lot from my early childhood. And what memories I have of it aren't so wonderful, so I'd rather not discuss them. Yeah, that's a long time ago. I was fortunate in having my Uncle Joe around to write the checks for my schooling and a lot of other things. And I think I learned later in life that my mother, when she went to work, she actually did earn a lot of the money that went to my education, and that wasn't all paid for by my uncle who took the glory.
What was your education like?
I guess it was better than average. I went to public schools until my last year in high school. And because my uncle's boss, who was Generoso Pope, who owned whose family, he first and his family afterwards, Colonial Sand and Stone Company, which is probably the biggest building company as the sandstone, stones of fire in the city of New York, and that ain't peanuts. And his kids went to Horace Mann, and my uncle was vice president in the company. You couldn't get any further. It was a family deal. And because they went to Horace Mann, my last year was spent in Horace Mann, and that was dismal. I was doing fine in public school, and I was put in this environment of children who are from very well-off families, and I was socially just not in with them. I was a guy from New York City, and there were people from New York City. But I got through that too. Then I went to Hopkins, and I managed to squeeze my way through Hopkins. The first 6 months of the year I did well. But then I found out that girls existed, and that was a bad experience. Should have been put off till later. And then after I went to Hopkins, I guess I tried to volunteer. So I went to the Navy, and I went to the Marines, and I went to the Army, and I was no good for any of them until about 6 months later I got a letter from my friends in the community saying that I was chosen to go into the Army and fight for them. So I got into World War II. I hope I can keep all this chronologically proper. So I was in the Army. We went, I got clothes and food and all of that sort of stuff. Spent some time in Louisiana, and then they arranged for a trip to Europe. Now, everybody gets a chance to go to Europe, you know. So I went to England, and from England we went across whatever the heck it is, the Channel, to France. And on top of, there were big cliffs there where we landed. We landed in landing boats. And up on top of one of those cliffs was a French woman, good-looking French woman, even from a distance you could see that, who was waving to us, and she was greeting us with a favorite American greeting, F you. And so that's how we came into France. And then we made a quick trip to Belgium. Belgium. I guess we went from Belgium up to the Siegfried Line, and we stayed there for a short time. You can read about it. And then they had some sort of people with crazy minds that wanted us to see bulges. So they invited us down to the Battle of the Bulge. And we came in on the northern side, and Patton and his troops came in on the southern side. And so one of the men from our outfit was the first to greet Patton and his troops that came down from the southern side. Your blood and my guts, Patton, he was called by the troops. And I guess that was the end. we stopped the incursion. They had put a pincer forth into Belgium, I guess it was. So anyhow, we blocked it off. And when that was over, we were sent back up north. All the land that we had won before we went down there, one meaning get it back from the Germans that had taken it, that the English took over when we left, was lost by the English, so we had to go back and we had to fight the same territory all over again. They had very good sappers. You know what sappers are? But,
You want to define sappers?
huh?
You want to define sappers, though?
Sappers are the guys that go out in the minefields
Yeah.
and get hold of the mines and pull them up and out and make paths for guys to go through. So they have very good sappers, and we appreciated that. But they had too much war, the English troops, and we didn't have good relationships with them otherwise. They were to our north, and we felt that they dragged feet. I forget who the heck it was, the general that was in command up there of the English. And then we fought our way across to the Elbe River. Then Germans gave up, huh?
I've heard you've told stories about a dog that you.
Oh yeah, that was when we came back. I think of that poor animal. I remember it many times. The story was like this. I see this big German shepherd limping out of the woods onto the field where we were having our meal. And I looked at the son of a gun and I said to myself, well, that poor dog is in trouble and I can't just leave that go. So I kneeled down and called the dog over, and the dog came over, and I had my heart in my mouth because I didn't know which part of me he was going to have for lunch. And I looked at his paw, and he had a thorn in it. Whoever cleaves in the lion, is that the story? Well, I pulled the thorn out. And from then on, that was my dog. Nobody could really touch that dog. Get into chow line with me, and if one of my friends wanted to pet him, and then unfortunately we were going home and we were in cattle cars, and they had what we used to call a pee break, and the dog took a run in the field, and I called it back because I saw the train was going to start, and it didn't come right away. And then it saw that we were going, and it ran alongside the train and ran under the wheels and got killed. That was a bitter moment. So that was the story of the dog.
So,
What else?
I think when you were telling the narrative, you're going through the war, I think you just told about the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, that was in between. That was sort of sandwiched in between. We were up in the northern part of the English north of us. There was a guy by the name of Montgomery, I think, involved. He would fight to the last American or the last colonial from the English colonies.
So
he had a reputation for that.
Were a lot of
And,
the troops that were near you colonial troops?
I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't remember seeing them. But we were pulled down. That was a very severe winter. And we were pulled off a line there, and we had a fabulous trip down to the Ardennes. Lights on, lights off, on the trucks at night. They didn't know whether they should put them on and take them off, and whether the Germans were coming or weren't coming, or whether they were around anywhere. What's all this message? And I guess finally they were off. We got down in the Bulge in the Ardennes. And that was a pretty bit of cold winter. Part of the time I was billeted with some of the people down there. One of the amusing stories that shows you that you got to know your French properly. I was in the house of some people, and I had received a can, did I tell you this? Of herring. Tomato herring. And I wanted to give it to them because they had very little to eat. This also gives you an idea of how the guys who left the place were like, when we drove them out. So he wanted to know what was in it. I said, poison. All of a sudden it's dead quiet. I knew that something was wrong. That's happened to me a number of times when I spoke a foreign language. You better be careful. And then we finally got it down to the difference between poisson and poisson. You understand. And so they were very, very happy to have that canned fish. And that's the story there. There were a number of things, I guess.
What was your experience like being a medic?
A medic?
Or a doctor?
I wasn't a doctor. I was a GI. I was a litter bearer. I don't know. I didn't have too much going out in the field and pulling people in. I once went behind the lines. I've been thinking this a number of times. And just to give you a taste of what war was like, they had racks with about this much space in between. The Germans had that for their concentration camps where they kept the Jews in. But this was where the bodies were. And I saw one of my friends there. It's very... Sorry, there are sore points there. It was a very bad experience. He's a real good guy. There were two of them. I think both of them had gotten it in the same fight. I had wanted to go up, but they kept me from going up. They said it's terrible up there, and you don't want to go up there. You just come back dead. One of them was this fellow, and the other guy I didn't see, but he was killed too, I think. One of them, this guy we called the Shanty Irish, and the other guy he worked his father was in Schrafts, Schrafts was a very fancy candy and eating place at one time, and he was the panty waist Irish. They were from each on his side of the railroad tracks. They were both killed. Didn't make any difference to the Malchamotes. And that's all about that. But it was a cold winter in the Ardennes, and we used to sleep together and very close together because to move apart you'd be cold. And then in the morning We were bored there for a while. We didn't always sleep out in the field. And in the morning, get up to put shoes on, and the shoes were frozen solid to leather. It was uncomfortable, but they softened up like everything else did. We'd sit around with the Belgian farmers sometimes, pass cigarettes around. They'd pass a pack of cigarettes, and then by the time it got back to you, the pack would be empty. But, you know, those are little incidents you remember because of the nature of the incidents.
Didn't you once tell me a story about running across no man's land or somewhere?
Oh, I don't know. I went out at night one time. There was a railroad trestle. And I also, among other things, had to deliver a message. And it was a question of either creeping and crawling for at least a mile or getting up and walking. So you know what I did? I got up and walked. And if anybody shot at me, I just had to hope that they were as poor a shot as they usually were. So I get down fast enough. But anyhow, we went across the town and there was no problem. There's another place I don't quite remember with a big gully, and it was a challenge to go across that gully without getting killed. But I had the right combination with people, you know, up there. So I made it all right.
I seem to remember you saying that you saw or took care of some folks who were pretty scared.
Yeah, all civilians were pretty scared at that time. And some of the houses, sometimes we stayed in the houses in the bombed out town. I remember one time at night, all of a sudden we heard callupity, 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 callup. And there a whole group of horses with a white horse leading the group. It was very impressive. And then they come running back again, you know, completely wild and out of control. And they did that a couple of times. I don't know where they landed up. But, you know, you feel pretty badly for the animals. They have no idea what's going on. And there they are, being stressed like that.
How about the soldiers?
Huh? Maybe the soldiers. They were expendable. If you want to know about the soldiers, they were expendable, period.
Did you end up taking care of some soldiers who were frightened too, or?
Oh, yeah, you know, they were, in the old times, were called shell shocked. But in World War II, they came up with a degree and were called battle fatigued. And that was a very, very sad thing to see, because there were people that couldn't stay up with their putties because they were scared and broke down completely. And I remember one guy, he wanted to stay up with the guys, he was crying, completely out of control. But he couldn't stay up with the guys. So they brought him back to where I was. To see, because there were people that couldn't stay up with their putties because they were scared and broke down completely. And I remember one guy, he wanted to stay up with the guys, he was crying, completely out of control. But he couldn't stay up with the guys. So they brought him back to where I was. which was a concrete dugout that the Germans made at the time. So what, can we talk about something otherwise than that?
Sure. So when the war ended,
What was it like?
what was the experience then? Where were you when the war ended?
Well, I was in Germany, you mean that? Yeah, I was in Germany. We had gotten up to the Elbe River, and from there on, the other side belonged to the Russians. We should have gone to Berlin. Most of the GIs wanted to go. There's a famous bridge, Remagen, which was blown over the river there. Well, most of the guys wanted to go over. I went over and I got myself a couple of pistols. And there was a Russian soldier that was there. He wanted one of them. Here, buddy, take it, get that away from me. Because half of them, they were drunk. And the other half weren't sober, so. And they were quite wild, and you never knew what to expect. And we were going really AWOL, absent without leave, and we went over the river. But we went over there, and I still probably, I don't know. I came back, and I guess there was a gun shop in town. And I think I had a P-38 and gave it to get a 45 for it, and the 45 went in the drawer and it's in the bank. And Grandma doesn't want it to have anything to do with it. So it stays in the bank vault. It's safe there, you know. So when they break into the vault to steal the money out of the bank, they'll have an extra gun to help them out.
So, at what point did you get to leave duty?
I mean, when I was discharged?
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by at what point. We were Army of Occupation, and then we were headed for Japan. And in the meantime, I had gotten a transfer on request to work in a lab. And I worked in a lab in Darmstadt, I guess.
What did you do there?
Oh, God, there was a lot of biological stool cultures and some chemical testing, bloods.
For military purposes?
Yeah, for military purposes. A lot of stool testing from troops that were down in Africa. They had amoebiasis, amoebi, and various gut infections. And we used to do the stool testing for that. And there was prejudice in the United States Army. So I taught another guy all the lab work. So he got promoted. And I went in and I said something to the officer. And that son of a gun, he was lucky that I had enough knowledge and self-control not to slap him under his desk. I was really angry about that. What the guy that was promoted knew it too. But there was prejudice in the Army, for sure.
What were other ways that you experienced that?
Well, there was one guy from, I'm going to say he's a Southerner, and it doesn't mean that all Southerners are like that. But he got up at an orientation meeting in the division, and he said, where were there any Jews in the war. Where were any Jews killed in the war? Were they killed in the shit houses of something or other? I don't know. And he was lucky that we didn't go after him then. But that's the way some of these some of them, not all of them, because I had two sergeants that were real hillbillies, that were top-notch guys and knowledgeable in combat. You didn't want to have them on the side against you. And they knew how to creep and crawl through the lines, and in the morning one of the Germans, they were to a foxhole, would wake up in the morning and they'd find their companion with the head cut off. So these guys didn't play jokes. And for them to go through the lines and do that and get back again, they had to have a lot of skill. I mean, it's not exactly the nicest skill in the world. And they were not, didn't show any signs of being anti-Semitic at all. This other guy, that I think I still remember him. And I called him to go outside, but or one of them I called to go outside with me. And he said, "No, the only time I'll come outside with you is when I go out first and I'm behind the door with a brick in my hand." So this is the type of character you'd find in the United States of America, and this is what we fought for, see? Not quite, but...
So, at what point did you leave the lab to do?
Just before I was discharged, I guess.
And what happened then?
Then I went home, went to New York.
And what happened?
There was a guy that I rode with in a train. I don't remember all the circumstances, but we were talking Army. I guess I was discharged or something. He wasn't. He had a guilty conscience, he told me, because he used to go around cutting fingers off and taking the rings off of the fingers of the guys. And then he came home and he said he could help with himself. He was a Texan or so. I'll never forget that. He had a lot of problem with having done that. And his concept of a Jew was a guy with a black hat and payas. And he told that to me, he said, "You're a Jew, It's like the guy that came to China and went to services in China, and one of the Chinese fellows at the end of the service looked up at him and said, 'You're Jewish.' And that's the way it was for him. If you didn't have a black hat and payas and stuff. So he was very surprised that I was Jewish. Things like that.
So when you got back to New York, what did you do?
I tried to look for a job, and I tried to get into medical school at the same time. And the job market was closed, and nobody really gave two hoots in hell about the soldiers that had been in the war, and certainly not about those that were looking for jobs.
So
that happened also after the Vietnam War.
Didn't you not get into medical school because of quotas?
That was probably part of it. I think that also my grade score wasn't that great. I did wonderful when I started out at Hopkins, and then I petered out, so I didn't get the scores that I should have gotten or could have gotten. But Hopkins was a hard school to get. Undergraduate school was a hard school to get good grades at. But
so when did you decide you were going to go to Switzerland?
Well, I had decided, I figured I wasn't going to get into medical school, so I was back I got a job at Macy's. I was back for about a year, and I knew I went into one interview. One of the medical schools. And I told the guy, I know that you're not going to give me admission to your medical school, so I can tell you this, that I have admissions to 5 medical schools in Europe. And by God, I'm going to go to one of them and become a doctor, whether you want me to or not. And I turned around and walked out. That was Flower and Fifth Avenue Hospital. A lot of it was my fault, but a lot of it wasn't.
So, when you went to Switzerland, how much Swiss German did you already speak?
I didn't speak any Swiss German. I spoke what they call Hochdeutsch, High German, proper
Where did you
German.
learn that?
I learned that in college. And between that and what I picked up in Yiddish, I managed. Some of the American guys were wise guys, and they'd say to the professor, gee, I can express it in English, but I can't express it in German in answer to a question. He said, well, then express it in English. And he sort of caught most of them with their pants down because they didn't know it any more in English than they did in German, than they did in Chinese. But I guess I learned, what you usually learn in high school in a couple of years or 1 year of college German. And when I got to Switzerland, that's how I met Mommy, Grandma. I was sitting and reading Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain at the Lake of Zurich. And some woman came up with a couple of kids, and they spotted me as an American, or she did right away, and started to ask me questions about a postcard she had of a statue in Switzerland called the Kinderfresser, who used to eat children. And so she wanted me to verify the fact that this gnome existed, to the children. And while I was there, Grandma came skipping down, and they hadn't seen each other since the war. They were in camp together. And I had a Swiss friend who died because of some Swiss doctor's negligence. He had the use of his brother-in-law's car, and I knew him from back in the States. He was a fraternity brother of mine in Hopkins. So he had the use of the car, and he had a date, and I didn't. And I saw Grandma, and I said, So after various negotiations and discussion for a couple of weeks, I finally convinced her that I wasn't Dracula. And so she decided that she would go, we could go out on a date together, and we drove around the Swiss Alps. And then I turned to my friend. Grandma had to go, she had to meet a friend in Paris. I turned around to my friend and said, I'm going to marry that girl, Walter. And when she went to Paris, I got in the train and went to Paris, and I proposed to her. And that's a result of that proposal.
Happened pretty quickly.
Was this for you or for me?
That's for you.
Oh, thanks. So, Our families were a pain in the neck.
How so?
Well, they made us wait. We wanted to get married right away. So they made us wait for a year. And so we had a correspondence going for a year. At the end of the year, we hadn't changed our mind. So we had him over a barrel because we were both of age and all we had to do was go and get married. But you can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? We have to. So they said, well, if you're going to do it, my father-in-law said, we'll give you a wedding. So we got married.
What were their
Twice.
objections?
Huh?
What were their objections? That you were too young, or
You mean
the family?
Grandma's family to me?
Yeah.
I was an American.
Mm-hmm.
I was a student. I came from Russian Jewish parentage and not from German Jewish. Isn't that enough? That's three good strikes, no?
So,
So when they saw that they couldn't do anything about it, I think the way they put it, I put a gun to their head. Not literally, just figuratively. And so they agreed if we would wait a year. So we waited a year, and we got married. And as was their prediction, Grandma had all sorts of troubles because she married me.
so after you got married, where did you?
We lived in
You were still in medical school, right?
Yeah. We had a little room, I guess one flight up the stairs, that this woman, Fräulein Bonner, sublet to us. And we used to cook our meals in a coffee pot more often than not. You can make a lot of things in an electric coffee pot if you have skills in cooking. What else?
Well, so you set up house there, and when you finished medical school, what?
I came back to the States. I had an internship at Kings County Hospital. And, wait a while. Yeah, and I didn't have much money, as you can well imagine. And I had got residencies at McCook Hospital, which used to be in Hartford. Doesn't exist anymore. I forget how it was. I had mind does funny things. Oh, I think I had my 1 year of internship. And then I stayed at McCook, I think, for 2 years.
What made you decide to move back to the States?
No, the family was back here.
Mm-hmm.
What I said to the family, if they were going to give us trouble, we would go to Israel.
Which side of the family were you worried would get in trouble?
Both sides. But mainly then, if we would come here, it would be my side of the family that would, be involved more than Grandma's side.
How did Grandma feel about moving to the States?
She was my wife. She would go anywhere, whither thou goest, I shall go, as Ruth said to Naomi or something. But that's what you say in the marriage ceremony, incidentally.
So, by that point, Mom
No,
was
she
born,
was
right?
glad that we could be together, and we didn't care if it wasn't accepted by the family. Well, I mean, we cared, but if it wasn't accepted by the family, we would have found a way. Gone to Israel. I would have been speaking Hebrew more,
So,
better than I do now.
so when you moved back to the States, and you've been telling me about the different residencies you had, and
Yeah.
where,
Well,
where were you living at that point in time?
well, the first year we lived with my mother, as I remember it. That was a hard year. That was when I was in Kings County for my internship. That's all the way out in Brooklyn. I used to come back the nights I had off. It's a long train ride. I used to sleep, I don't know, however I awakened at the right time to get off. But I did. And after that, I found that at it's McCook Hospital in Hartford, I could have living quarters. So I took that, mainly because it wasn't far from where my mother lived. And it supplied us with food and a place to sleep.
What
It wasn't
year?
all too bad, but I could have gotten better.
What year are we in
Now, 2000 and something.
I mean, at that point in time, what year was it?
Oh boy, 1942. That's maybe around 1949, I would suppose.
So,
Let's see, I got out of high school in 42. Then I think I got out in 3 years. Because of the war, we had to take an accelerated program. So I'm not so sure.
to what extent were you involved in politics at that point?
Politics? What sort of
Yeah.
politics? You're always involved in politics.
Yeah.
It's part of life.
Yeah. So were you a member of a political party? And
No, I was never really a member of, don't pick your feet. I was never really a member of a political party as such. As far as registration goes, I've been a registered Democrat.
so,
A New York Jew being anything but a Democrat at that time, I mean, that would be like saying that you converted or something.
so was your politics at that point more a matter of that having always been the party that you're part of, or was it specifically things that you believed in that the Democratic Party believed in but not?
No, I think that that was more that's always what we're associated with. The Republican Party for New Yorker was sort of a reactionary New England group that had a lot of money. And the Communist Party, I had a friend who was in the Communist Party, or I don't know whether he was in the party, but his friends were. He used to hang around the Daily Worker, and I have a lot of friends that worked in the Daily Worker. You know the Daily Worker?
Yeah. And so if you had a friend who was involved with the communists, later on when pressure on communists within the United States really started to get stronger, did that?
The only thing that affected me in that line was when the Nazi Party in New York started to get strength, and that was killed when we got into war. But there were cells of Nazis in upper New York State, and if you went down to what they call Germantown in New York, which I did, you would find them all around the place. I went to a movie with a friend there, and everybody got up and said Sig Heil, and they had Hitler on the screen. You can imagine two Jew boys in the theater with everybody a Nazi.
So,
You couldn't imagine it. But it's a very peculiar feeling.
what would you like to talk about?
I don't know.
Maybe the sorts of things that you did for fun when you were younger, back even before high school.
I don't really know. I don't remember so well about what I did for fun games. My mother was when it came to schoolwork, was a disciplinarian.
And then you were also working for part of that time, right?
After I got out of the Army, I was. And
No,
before
I mean-
I went into the Army, I guess.
But when you were younger, didn't you deliver newspapers?
Oh, yeah, that's, sold newspapers and magazines.
Hmm. So what was
Used
that
to go
like?
around Oh, I don't know, that wasn't such a big deal. You'd go around, you'd try to get customers. Yeah, I had a woman who nobody would go up to because she had two long eye teeth and they thought she was a witch. She was a very nice woman. And so I would deliver magazines and papers to her place. That was the only thing I really remember about that.
Mhm.
It wasn't bad.
So, just to skip to a completely different point in history, my mom tells me that you were fairly active in opposition to the Vietnam War. What was,
I don't think so.
well,
I don't know what they're fighting there for, but that's,
so,
I don't think that, maybe Grandma did more than I did about that. I don't know that I'm very active politically in most things. It's the younger generation that's going to affect. Nowadays, my generation shouldn't tell the younger generation how they should live their lives. First of all, they haven't been the best example in the world. And second, each generation is going to have to figure out its own way, and they can take a look, see what the others...
Hi.
You're not letting that thing run, are you?
Hmm? Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. You didn't ask my permission.
Do you want me to get a HIPAA consent form?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry,
That's
interrupted.
the way she gets around me.
I'm sorry.
wait, it was,
You are not.
so, I mean, unless there's anything else, and any other memories in particular you'd like to...
I don't know what else there is to talk about. I just always had to keep my nose to the grindstone if I wanted to get anywhere. Some people get their way a lot easier. But I had a pretty well work to achieve.
Mhm.
That's okay, that's how it goes. But I think Abraham Lincoln was it that said some people are born great.
No, that's Shakespeare. Some people achieve greatness.
That's
Some
are
are
you
born
sure?
great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness, the rest
rests
upon them.
upon it.
And that's
Yeah.
actually in a comic context, believe it or not.
I don't remember where it came from.
Twelfth
That's
Night.
Twelfth Night?
So I'm gonna just put this.
I never had greatness thrust upon me, grandmother there. Quite a while. I guess there's no more light than that.
So, are any of these? So you're not in any of these?
No. Those are there.
Could you
And
just?
my grandfather and grandmother
Could you
were
just
there.
point out who's here?
Huh? This is my mother. And I can't make this. Back my glasses. Oh, that's her apron. That's my grandmother and grandfather, and that's one of my uncles, and that's another one of my uncles.
Is Uncle Joe there?
Yeah, I don't know which one. I think that one probably, but I don't know which one for sure. All I know that there was another brother who fell out of a window and got killed.